Welcome to the Power Lunch, and I got a really bad echo. Let's see if that helps. Yes, that should help. Welcome to the Power Lunch, and I still got a bad echo. Welcome to the Power Lunch. This is Rhett Power, your host. We're on LinkedIn Live. LinkedIn's new platform for engagement and live video, and it's a pleasure to really be on the platform. Now, we simulcast the program on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, of course, and Twitch. I don't know why we're on Twitch, but we are. And anyway, you can catch it all. You can watch the program on all those platforms. Now, the point of the show is to bring on today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, corporate CEOs and founders, people who are doing amazing work in the world, so that we can learn from them and get better at what we do. Today is no exception. I've got a great guest. We're going to introduce him in just a second. Now, if you like the program, give it a like or share so that your network can benefit from these conversations, and it helps us grow our audience. So it serves two purposes there. And so anyway, look, I want to introduce you to Chris Ronzio. Chris is an amazing and interesting person. He's an entrepreneur, he's an investor, he's a speaker, author, he's a fellow Inc. columnist. His column is the Process Playbook. So I think he puts out stuff on a weekly basis. So check him out on Inc. He is the founder and CEO of Trainual. And we're going to talk about that today. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be a fun conversation, and I think it's going to be a helpful conversation because the work that you're doing focus really on improving systems and helping businesses get better. I want to talk about that a little bit. What led you to create something like Trainual? Because is it because you've seen sort of how the lack of processes and sort of those things in business really hurt business from growing, or was there another reason? Because that seems
I was exhausted of doing it the old way. So my first company was a video production company, and we did live sporting events around the US. And so we would hire camera operators in different markets and have to get them up to speed to do the event when we were not there with them. And so they had to represent our brand and set the cameras up correctly and get the footage and ship it back to our office. And so everything had standard operating procedures and checklists. And we were training people with password protected WordPress sites and Google sites and Word docs. And we had, Google Drive and Dropbox folders just full of stuff. And it felt like everything was just scattered. And then worse, we'd send it over to people and then just kind of cross our fingers that they'd read it. And so after a few mistakes, we then started doing tests, and we had, they had to fill out forms and get certified. So they'd have a tag in our CRM. And so it was just kind of like banging my head against the wall, trying to make sure that we had a process for our business, and then people understood the process well enough that I could hold them accountable for doing it right. And that's really where the idea of Trainual came from. So it was just my own experience doing it the old way, and then consulting with 150 or so other companies and watching them with their 3-ring binders and their Google Docs. And I thought, why isn't there a tool for this? So we made one.
So what's the biggest weakness? Like you said, you've seen hundreds of these companies. What do you think the biggest weakness is? And aside from the 3-ring binders, I cannot speak this week. The 3-ring binders and the lack of what do you see when you go into a company, you work with a company, where their processes sort of break down? Where do you see the biggest weaknesses?
I think the biggest weakness is that you take for granted that you know how to do something, and so it comes naturally. It's easy for you to do. And when you look to grow a business, you've got to be able to delegate that responsibility to someone else. And you go through this internal battle of, it's just easier if I do it. It would take me longer to explain it to someone. And so it's really an investment to take the time to write it down or to document it in some way in order to give it to the next person. And it takes that investment up front before you ever see the return on the back end. So I think the hardest part is first trying to delegate, and then second, just knowing that documentation is not the most urgent thing in the business, but it is really important if you want to get to the next level.
Well, it seems like, I mean, it makes sense to me. We had a very heavily, my first business was, there was an exact process for what we had to do, and it was a pretty technical process. And I don't think we would have ever been able to grow unless we had, and at first we didn't write it down, but at some point, if we wanted to grow, we realized, and if we wanted to scale this, we really had to write these processes down, because otherwise, we could never get out of the warehouse and work on the business. We would have always been stuck back there if we'd have never written it down. But that it really did transform our company, and it allowed us to work on the important things.
Yeah, I have a simple little phrase I trademarked, but it's first you do it, then you document it, then you can delegate it. And so it's easy, but when you think of all of the different parts of your business, you're experimenting when you're learning how to do it. And so you might do it differently every day because you're trying to figure out what works. But when you land on something that works and you're doing it consistently, then you need to document it clearly, write down the steps, or record a video, or however you want to get it memorialized. And then you can delegate it to someone else, and then the cycle just continues. They ask questions, you improve how you document it, the documentation gets better, you improve how you're doing it. But you do that over and over again for each little piece of your business, and then the result becomes this playbook that you've got to be really scalable.
And usable, right? Not just something that sits in the corner, and is not used. It becomes sort of codified, and that's the way we do it, right?
Right.
What is, how do you get, I want to talk about onboarding, because that's another area that I see, particularly in my coaching, is a big problem, and it's evolving today because of remote work and everything else, and the way that work is changing. What is your view on, and how do you work with people on sort of bringing on and hiring new people, onboarding them, and talk about remote work a little bit too, because I know you've written a little bit about that and how to really bring those types of workers on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have today employees, team members around the world, around different countries. We've got some people in the Philippines that help with our ticketing, customer success. We've got some development resources in Ukraine for bug fixes, and we've got even employees across the country in Boston, and our regular office, our headquarters is here in Arizona. And so as we're bringing on people, it's really important that they all get the same onboarding experience so that they feel like they're part of a team. And onboarding sometimes gets this rep of being like just for HR. And then your processes and your playbook is more operations. And I see them being very much one and the same, because people need to learn about what it means to be a part of the company and to be a part of your culture and to be a team member. And then they need to learn how to do the job and what you actually expect of them. So it's this very seamless process, or at least it should be. So when I think about onboarding, there's a real simple way that you can just a framework, a couple bullet points that you can onboard people to the company. And it's very similar to if anyone went to college or university or anything like that, you went to an orientation. I remember mine.
Yep.
They marched us all around campus. They said, here's how you check out books at the library. Here's how you swipe your card in the cafeteria.
Right.
And then I left feeling like a part of the school. I had the t-shirt and I've got the hat, and it's almost the confirmation for the employee that they made the right decision when they accepted the job. And so it's really important that you get this right. So what we recommend is start with just the simplest welcome to the company. So this could be a 30-second video with your phone where you just say, as the leader in the company, thanks so much. I'm really glad that you're starting. We can't wait to have you as part of the team. If you're watching this, that means that you made it through our 5 interview process, and we all really liked you, and we're glad you're here. And just that quick video adds so much personality to a new employee's experience. And that every person is going to get that same experience, rather than someone clocking in for their first day around the world and no one else is online, or they walk into the office and the person that normally does the tours is out sick that day. And so you want everybody to have that experience. So that's step one. Interrupt me at any time, but I'll keep going.
Keep going. Yeah, this is good. This is good stuff.
Okay, so after you introduce them after a quick welcome, I always like to do the founding story. So if I sat down, had coffee with anyone, they'd say, why did you come up with this? Why did you start this? And that's interesting as a person, but the more you tell that, the more you get sick of playing your greatest hits. And so you want to record that in your system so that every new employee gets to experience that energy around why the business even existed. So tell that founding story, and then tell your mission and vision and your values and just what it means to be a part of this company. Where are we going in the next 5 years? Is there a big target we're after? What makes someone a great part of this team, or what are the characteristics that have made people not work out here? You can talk about those too. That's really important. And then after that, get into your team. Who else am I working with? Quick bios. You can just grab this from your website if you've got a team page, but show all of your new people. Here's a little information about your coworkers to get to know them. And then the last thing is something I took from my video production days. We were doing youth sporting events, like I mentioned, and so there was a context surrounding the camera work that if you were just showing up and pushing record, but you didn't understand the bigger picture, you couldn't possibly do the best job that we needed done. But if you understood, here's where your footage is going, you stream it to the Jumbotron and the judges replay system, and you've got to make sure you're wide enough to get all the hands and arms inside the screen for the technical judging. And at the end of the performance, here's how you should clip it off, and here we're selling videos to grandparents around the world, so capture those smiles. That context is really important. So within everyone's business, I recommend that you spell out your entire process, from how you get the sale, how you serve the customer or ship the product, how you retain that customer, how you collect payment, because it gives them an appreciation for what everyone else does in the business. And so I think that's kind of the high level points for an introduction.
I like that idea of the intro video and the culture video. How do you talk about, one of the things I always try to get my clients to work on is to personalize their onboarding process a little bit too, in terms of talking about with that person how they fit into the company and their role and why it's important, and their specific task or whatever their role is, how that's going to help us get to this sort of big goal up here, and sort of how important they are to that success.
Yeah, definitely. So we personalize in two ways. So the first thing is, during the hiring process, we try to understand what makes that person tick. Like, do they have any hobbies or things they really like? And is there a way that we can customize their day one experience, whether it's taking them to their favorite restaurant or leaving a little gift on the table? Everyone gets bombarded with Trainual swag when they start, so that they've got the backpack and the water bottle and the phone charger and all that. And so then we try to customize that a little. But then in terms of their role in the company, we do a welcome interview. So this is like the opposite of an exit interview. I love it. We do a welcome interview that says, here's why we picked you, just as a reminder during the hiring process. Here's what made you stand out, and here's what just to reiterate the expectations we have for this role and the impact it's going to make on our goals. And then we set some milestones, and we say, here's what you should be able to do week 1, month 1, and in your first 90 days. And we mutually agree on that, so that we know if they're starting on the right foot.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And there's so many times I've come into a company and they've got high turnover, and you look at that process, right, and they just got plopped down at a desk for day 1 without any goals and without any direction, and they were there to fill a vacant place, right? And they were given a task, but they felt alone. They felt like they were just kind of left to their own devices, and that to me is a recipe for success or disaster.
Yeah, I think the problem I just want to harp on one thing you said. When you give someone a task, a lot of people delegate tasks, and tasks are just like those tennis ball machines that just shoot at you, and
Great analogy. I love it.
And when they run out of tasks, they're sitting around like, what am I here for? Or it's up to you to keep throwing tasks at them. And so instead, you want to delegate responsibilities. You want to say, here's the area of the business you're responsible for. Here's the outcome in the business you're responsible for, and let them manage the tasks. And I think that's an important distinction.
Well, it makes them, it says to you trust them to get a really important part of the business done. Right. And when you get that done, somebody else can do their thing. Right. So I like that. And it forces them to collaborate with other people, to communicate with other people. And it shows that you trust and trust them, really.
Absolutely.
I love that. Talk about, let's go back to scaling for a second. I kind of jumped through that pretty quick. How do you think, when you learn to put all this stuff in processes, to me, that's an essential part of being able to scale a business. Do you agree with that, or is there more to it, you think?
No, absolutely. I think scaling is very complex, but you can only scale if you make things as simple as possible. I'll say that again because that's confusing. I think scaling is complex. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot that comes out of it, but you can only scale if you've got something simple. So the first thing for people to scale is to say, what's the core product or service you offer? And let's cut away all the other stuff. If you're doing lots of customizations and you're in a lot of different industries and you got a million SKUs and you're doing services for anyone that'll write you a check, there's no scaling. There's no way you could scale. And I remember with my video company, I started it when I was 14, actually, which is a whole separate story. But when I started, we were doing music videos, we were doing weddings, we were doing bar and bat mitzvahs, we'd do anniversary parties, we'd do the soccer games at our high school and the talent show. And, it was like, anyone that'll give me $1, I'll take it. Let's do this. But that's, of course, not scalable. And so I started doing these sporting events and realizing that, there were games every week or there were championships every couple months. And that was a repeatable business, whereas maybe a bride gets married once or twice or 3 times, if you've got a good one. But I saw the sports as let's just do that. And so then we started doing, all these different sports. And even then, the processes are different for swimming versus figure skating versus cheerleading. So then we narrowed it down even further and we said, let's just do these sports. And every time we pared away the complexity, we scaled up the next level. And so I think that's the first piece of scaling, is cut down to something simple that you can really have a process around. Because it's hard to have a process if you do so many different things.
Right. No, that's great wisdom. That's really great wisdom. What sports, by the way, did you narrow down to?
So we did 3 things. We did figure skating, equestrian, and swimming at the end, because they were, and it was like synchronized swimming and synchronized figure skating, and these big team events. Because for us, it had to be a private sport that people paid a lot to participate in, so they value buying the video.
Right.
And there had to be thousands of people at the event, so that we had a high likelihood of selling a lot of copies. And so that was kind of our parameters.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And such random event. Are you like are you in one of those sports? Is that why you were?
No, so the only connection, my wife was a figure skater. And so when we first started dating, we were doing a lot of cheerleading and dance videos, and she said, you should do figure skating. And so that was kind of the nudge in that direction. It worked out.
Interesting. And probably a niche nobody else was doing, that's for sure.
Yeah, no one was innovating there. That's absolutely sure.
Well, I wanted to say hi to a few people who are online. We've got Zarina Khatun. How are you today, Zarina? Thank you for joining us. Chris Chastain, thanks. Rich Rains, back again. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for joining us. Rich says, great communication on code. Keep going. Something about, Rich says, onboarding is more challenging than it, and I keep losing his, than it, what does he say? Onboarding is much more difficult than it sounds. Thanks for those comments, guys. So talk about Trainual for a minute and
Sure.
go back to that, and the sort of you talked a little bit about the vision for it, but kind of walk us through how that can really help a company scale and grow, and sort of put processes in place that can really help them.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the basics of Trainual, it's a training manual or an operations manual. And, operations manuals and franchise manuals have been around forever, but they're something that probably only the biggest companies are working on. It's a very enterprise thing because it takes a lot of time to create one of those 3-ring binders or one of those big standard operating procedure kind of documents. And so as I read the business books and I was going to events and hearing people talk about, invest in your systems and processes and work on the business, build a playbook, and you want a company that's scalable and sellable and turnkey, and someone could just come in and run it for you. And, that's kind of everyone's talking around the peripheral of this thing. And I saw this space where, it's beyond just creating a couple documents or template emails, and it's not quite this enterprise level of we need a whole talent and development department and learning infrastructure. And there seemed to be this gap in between where I need to be able to formalize the how-tos of my business. Right. And then I need to be able to split them into here's what different departments or roles in the company do. Mm-hmm. And then my team needs to be able to collaborate in an organized way so that everything's there and you can learn it and then you can reference it as needed. And so this intersection of training and HR and operations is what kind of led to the idea for Trainual. And so the platform is really simple. You sign up. It's a web-based tool. We've got apps for iOS, and Android is rolling out later this month. And so you start just writing step-by-step processes or policies. You can use one of our dozens of templates or interact with the other thousands of users in our private groups. And you just build out the playbook for your company, and you can use text and graphics and videos and use the built-in screen recording tool if you're recording something on your screen, and then it all gets saved in this centralized place. And so then you go through and you tag which roles in the company. Is this for everyone? Like this is our handbook and everyone needs to do this? Or is this just for our marketing team? Or is this just for our receptionist? What level of assignment is relevant? And then as you hire more people, you just say, I'm hiring another sales rep. Click, and then the new sales rep gets onboarded through the system. They learn about the company. They have access to everything they need to know. And it tracks 0 to 100% as the person goes through the material with time and date stamps, so they've been trained. And that's one of the things that when I was consulting was always this gray area. The person is doing it their way, and the manager says, well, I swear I've shown them how to do this. And it's like, well, when did you show them? Where was that? They say they've never been trained. Right. And so that accountability is a big piece of it. And then beyond just the initial training, it's, you want a thing that you can pull out when you've got a question, like the manual in your car, like when you've got to program your garage door button, you don't just remember how to do that. You pull out the thing and you flip through and you say, oh, there it is. And so it's the same thing, with our app. You pull it up on your phone, you say, how do I do this again? That's right. Thanks for the reminder. But it's not micromanaging people and saying, the 1,000 times a year you do this thing, complete this checklist. I think that's too in the weeds. You want to train someone to do it and then trust that they can do it. And that's what we do.
It also sounds like you can collaborate, right? If you're putting together a process or if you're refining a process, it sounds like your person across the country and in the Philippines and the one in the US and somebody somewhere else can kind of collaborate all together at the same time.
Yeah, so everyone can make their own processes. You can collaborate on one together, rearrange the steps, record your own things. And that act of collaboration is really insightful, because if you've got three people doing it slightly differently and then they all compare notes, you end up with the best practice, and by taking little pieces from how they did it and how they did it. And now you've got the way that the company does it. And that's really important. And then, the way also changes. The business changes. There's always a new best practice. And so what's cool about our system is if you change a process, if you update something, it gives you the option of, do you want to clear this where everyone has to go back through it? Or is this just a, minor grammar change or something? And so if you clear a completion, it notifies everyone to come back in the system, get back up to 100%, so that you've got the confidence that everyone's doing it the right way.
Oh, I love that. I love that it reminds everybody when something has changed that they need to go back and look at this new process or this new step. I think that's brilliant. What is
and there's
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to say there's also expirations. Sometimes you want somebody to go through something every year, and so we have a feature where you can set things to, once they've completed it, that completion lasts for 90 days or 365 days, and then they go through it again. So there's a lot of little features like that it's really just about making sure your people are up to speed, and then that they stay up to date. Yeah,
and you can't do that with a 3-ring binder, can you? not very well, anyway.
Not effectively, no.
So how hard is this thing to learn and to really, because I think the challenge I've seen with a lot of tech and a lot of new things, of programs and things, and I know we've experienced it in our company, when you bring on a new program like this, that it's a tough thing to get everybody to start using and to really get to onboard this itself, not just onboarding a person, but onboarding a program like this. Talk about that a little bit and how that's gone, and then what the sort of pricing structure is, and how easy is this for, and affordable is this for, maybe small to medium-sized companies that really want to bring on something like this so that they can work better across their teams.
Yeah, so we designed it to be a very easy do-it-yourself kind of tool. So if you can write an email or a Google Doc or a blog post, it's the same type of interface where you're just writing, you're dragging and dropping things in, you're clicking a little record button on the screen to record your screen. So technically, it's really easy. That's part of the selling proposition, I guess, is it should be easy. We also invest a lot in getting people started. So a customer success team helps. There's a onboarding walkthrough where you can choose from thousands of different topics that you might want to document in your business. And sometimes those prompts are enough to just get you started of, oh yeah, that's important. Let me write that down. We've got dozens of templates, like I mentioned, soon to be hundreds of templates on all different areas of the business, from your handbook to your orientation, like we just talked about, to introductions to how to use certain tools that might be applicable to your business, like Gmail or Slack or Outlook, things like that. And so we're trying to make it really easy to get started. That's the point, is it should be easy. In terms of cost, it starts at a license for up to 25 people. And we did that because we didn't want to charge per user and feel like we were nickel and diming people. Mm-hmm. And when you charge per user, you get people sharing logins. And if they're sharing logins, then how do you know that anybody's actually up to speed? Because that's what the system does.
That's right.
So we did it in chunks of 25. It starts at $99 a month right now. So it's very affordable if you have a training need, a documentation need. So I would say companies that are smaller, that are just a few people getting started, you can use Evernote or Google Docs or Word Docs and start to write down the most important things in your business. But once you start to hire a few people and there's this repetition of training and you want some consistency and you want some accountability, that's where the system makes a lot of sense.
So when you hit that 25 to 50 person company, and
no, it doesn't have to be that many. I mean, it can be 5 people, 10 people. It really depends on the business. We have customers sign up that are a startup, but they're building a franchise or a license type system, and the playbook is a project from day one. We have other companies sign up that they might only be 6 people, but it's one person with 5 virtual assistants doing the same thing. And so there's some repetition of training that they need. Or maybe they only have 15 people, but they're a seasonal business and they have high turnover, and training is really important even when they're in the single digits. So it depends a lot on the type of business.
Right. Fair enough. What is let's start talking about content strategy a little bit. Now you've built this company. Obviously you understand sort of how marketing, and I mean that's something that you've done very, very well, and you understand it, and you worked in the video space, so you understand the importance of video, and you get that. How did you launch how'd you launch the company and use, and how do you use like your ink column and everything else to sort of help you promote your the company?
So I could talk for hours on this, but I'll first correct you and say I have no idea what I was doing marketing-wise before Trainual.
It seems like you do.
This is a very, very new skill. So, I always looked at myself as an operations guy. That was the title I put on myself. And I thought, marketing people are really creative, and they're extroverted. They're okay being out there. And I just want to be like somebody's confidant, their COO. And so I had all these consulting clients that I was like their COO for hire, and we'd have these great strategic conversations. And that's what I really loved, was the process and operations and strategy. And so marketing felt like, who can I hire to do marketing? And that's how I thought about it for so long. So the big shift was when I realized all of my business as a consultant and with the video company had come from referrals, where I had great one-to-one interactions with people, and they said, oh, you should talk to Chris, or you should talk to this company and bring them on. And now with Trainual, when we're selling a $99 product, there's only so many people that that you can get introduced to, and you can't really run a business with $30, $100 customers. So the challenge was, how do we really scale this beyond just the one-to-one interactions? And so as we approached the launch of Trainual, which was January of 2018, not too long ago from when we're recording this, we did a few things. First, this sounds crazy, but I hired a photographer once a week to come around with me for a day, because I wanted to document the story of building something. And I started posting those pictures on LinkedIn and on Instagram and on Facebook, just to tell the story of, hey, I'm building something. It's cool. This is where I'm at. This is who I'm meeting with. This is who I'm talking to, and getting that interest going. Next thing, we just put up a simple landing page for Trainual where we could collect some leads. So I said, with the headline, here's the problem we're going to fix in your business. If you want to stay up to date and find out when we launch this, just put in your email. And it was very humble, modest. We collected like 170 emails. We didn't run traffic to it or anything, but it was something. And then for the launch, we did a launch party at a local hotel, and I invited everyone I knew, all local entrepreneurs, and I wanted to get some buzz around this so I could get some pictures to send to the newspapers and to post as if we were this big, important, company. That was really how it started, was just this kind of trying to create some buzz. So the next thing we did was we launched on this site called Product Hunt, where you can get some early adopters, some beta customers, and then we started an affiliate program to try to build relationships to other influencers, and that was important out of the gates. But what really scaled our marketing was when I started to just tell stories of my own small business experience and why the playbook was so important to me. So I told, different stories from my video days of when my girlfriend, who's now my wife, gave me an ultimatum, and she said, it feels like I'm the priority number 2 and your business is priority number 1, and you work 18 hours a day, and no, you won't trust anybody else to do anything, and if you don't figure this out, I'm out of here. And she'd like threaten that she was moving out of state. And I'm like, no, wait, I could fix this. And that actually prompted me to hire someone and to train them for their job. And And so, it's those authentic experiences that I started to share on Facebook Lives and on YouTube and through my blog posts with Inc. And I got more and more comfortable telling those stories. And I think that's the way that you go beyond just the one-to-one marketing and into the one-to-many marketing, is being able to say, here's my story or my lesson or whatever I learned, and here's, in a loose way, how it attaches to my product without me being salesy. I'm not trying to sell people to go buy the playbook and convince you on all the features and the benefits of why you'd want that. I'm trying to explain why investing in this was so useful for me over the last 20 years. And people can come to the realization on their own that that product makes sense. But I honestly don't care whether they use Trainual or whether they use a competitor or whether they use a Google Doc. I more care that they do the work, because I so passionately believe that if you focus on writing down some of your processes and empowering people and growing your team, you can have a better life and you can have a better business. And so that's what I'm sharing. And it's, call it marketing or whatever you want to call it. It's more connecting and being authentic.
And that works when you tell that story that people connect to. Man, that is so much more powerful than a sales message or a price message or whatever else it is people try to use. I think when you tell that real story, I think that I love the story of the ultimatum. I kind of have the same story, right? Fix it or else.
Right. I think we've all got something like that. And there's so many micro stories. Like my brother is a partner. He's our CMO. And as he's a few years younger than me, and he used to help with the video company. And then he went off and got a job. And I, for years, was having him take personality profile tests and all these things because I wanted to clone him.
Right.
I was like, I need to find someone that's just like you. And so we told that story in just a little iPhone video, and it became the message was, you can't clone the person, but if you write down what they do and how to do it, you can clone the results of what that person produces. And that's what you really need in business. And so that kind of loose correlation or loose connection between that story and the product that we have with Trainual has been amazing for us, and just running as Instagram story ads, but it's finding those little micro stories and then connecting them to your product that I think works.
How did you sort of narrow down? I think one of the things I find in a lot of my coaching and consulting is that there's a real confusion on what platforms that people should be using, what kind of content is going to work on those platforms, what kind of content is going to work for a particular type of business. How do you, when you talk to other entrepreneurs, just sort of outside of what you do, any recommendations there in terms of how to really narrow down what kind of content you need to be making and where you need to be putting it out?
Yeah, I would think you want to be where your customers are, and you want to create something that's different enough to catch someone's attention. And so when we were launching Trainual, I had been posting a lot on Instagram. I mentioned I had hired that photographer. I was trying to just tell stories there. And so that was the first thing we did, was let's just create a promoted story on Instagram. And because you do that through Facebook, we also had the same thing running on Facebook stories. And then we experimented and we said, well, let's try videos within the feed on Facebook, or let's try a carousel of images that you kind of scroll through on Facebook. And so it's just a little experimentation. We tried LinkedIn really briefly early on. We're back on it now, but early on we tried it briefly and saw it was really expensive compared to Facebook, and that there's a lot more competition for B2B software on LinkedIn. Right. And so we thought, well, let's go against the grain and do more consumer marketing on Facebook and Instagram, because we're trying to connect with people, and they're looking at those platforms anyway. Now, we're not showing them banner ads of like, here's a shiny web product, and why, people don't want to be in
Right.
work mode when they're at home. But we were showing them us walking on the street and talking and being like, why am I still working at this time? And I wish someone else could do this for me. And, and those are the same sentiments that people are feeling when they're scrolling through their own Instagram. And so then they get interested and they check it out the next morning when they get to the office. So it's just kind of about connecting with people where they are and giving them content that doesn't feel like spam.
Are you doing the same kind of content? So the content that you do on, say, Instagram, is it the same that you're putting on LinkedIn or Facebook, or is it different?
It's pretty similar. So we've gotten a little more sophisticated now with, LinkedIn we're using, I think, for some retargeting, where when, we've done some integrations or some campaigns with G2 and Capterra, and getting getting lists of people that are further down in the purchasing funnel. And for that audience, it makes sense to invest more on LinkedIn. And when they're at that stage in the buying cycle, you want to be selling more on the final features or the competitive differences. But when you're just top of market awareness, trying to get people to your website for the first time, then we go Instagram or Facebook or the places that are much cheaper cost per click to get them over there.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. What is your thought on, or how do you look at your branding versus the company's branding? Or do you sort of think it's one and the same? I mean, how do you treat your own sort of personal brand building versus the company's, or is there really any separation?
There definitely is separation, but I think my personality influences the brand's personality a lot. Same with my brother, because it started with just kind of us spinning up everything organically, and at some point the company developed a brand and a personality of its own, and now we've got a bunch of people that are creating things and kind of mimicking the same voice and tone and all that. The way I see it now is that my brand, I guess, whatever you would call it, is, and I'm an entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 14. I've done this my whole life, not even including the lemonade stands and car washes and landscaping businesses and whatever, right. But started a real company in my teens. And so I've got a lot of experience working in this and solving problems, and that's what I like to talk about. And so my general content that I'm doing and my ink column is a lot broader to appeal to really anyone that's starting, scaling, growing, right. Selling a business. And then within that large top of funnel audience, they're going to be aware that my company is Trainual, and maybe only 10% of them have any interest in the playbook for where they're at that that's stage right. In their life cycle. But when they do become interested, they go over to the Trainual website, and now they're in that Trainual marketing funnel where they're getting more, free tips and tools and our newsletter and our videos and our podcasts and all the content that would appeal to them at that stage of their business. So it's, I would say I'm out there doing more of the top of funnel entrepreneurship content, and then Trainual is more the, okay, you're interested, let's dig in, let's build your playbook.
We got you ready to go, and now it's, yeah, I like that. What is any tips? I know working with family can be tricky. How did you guys set it up between the two of you, and how do you sort of manage when there's conflict? Because I know it's tough working sometimes with family. Any special tips or hints there, or things that you do that
yeah, absolutely. So first, I would never work with family out of convenience. So I think a lot of people are saying like, hey, you've got nothing to do and I've got nothing to do, let's start a business. But there's this imbalance of skill set, or there's this something's not equitable from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't start it out of convenience. But if you truly have, like, you're at this job and you've got a family member at this job, and you say, wow, you are the world's greatest at this and I'm the world's greatest at this, we could really make something out of this. I think that's step one, is just you're starting it together for the right reasons. Step two is you've got to create the right balance, the right split from the get-go. A lot of people start a business with a family member and they're like, okay, I want to tiptoe around this, let's just be 50-50. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to say, what roles and responsibilities are you going to have? What roles and responsibilities am I going to have? What are market salaries for those different positions? How are we going to split up equity? What are you contributing to the business? What am I bringing to the business? And so in my case, Trainual was initially built as a prototype in my consulting firm. So I had, 5 employees in this prototype business that I was bringing a ton into the company. My brother was doing some marketing consulting, and he was like, "Hey, sign me up. This seems cool." So there's like there's a big disparity there, and so we had to agree on that out of the gates. Of this isn't an equal kind of breakdown. And then the last thing is the you've got to know who's the decision maker. Where does the buck stop or whatever. Another example of this, totally separate, is I have a minority equity stake in another business, a friend's business that I helped him start. And there was never any question from the very beginning that he's the decision maker, he's the boss, he makes all the final calls on everything. I'm just here as an advisor to kind of chime in, give my opinion, but I have no control. And so it was the same thing starting Trainual. It was like, we know I'm going to make the decisions. I'm the final call here. And so I think if you start very clear out of the gates with that sort of arrangement, then it works really well. And when it doesn't work so well, it's because there was too much ambiguity from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that makes that's actually right. That's just right. Right answer. If there is a right answer, but I think that is right. I think that it's whether you're starting with a friend or a family member, right? It's got to be clear and from the very beginning. I mean, I like to write down. I like in all those business arrangements that I have. I like having that very clear from the very beginning, even written down clear. So, what's the best advice that you've ever gotten, and who gave it to you? Final question.
Oh man, this is it. Okay, let's see. I think the best advice. This has come to me in so many different ways. But I remember sitting at a conference when I was 18 or something, and there was a guy on stage that had everyone take out a pen and pencil and write down, the number one takeaway from the event. And he said, we had to fold it up and put it in an envelope. And then he put something on the screen, and he was like, 98% of you won't do that thing. Like you won't do it. But I'm going to call every one of you. We have your phone numbers. I'm going to call every one of you in 30 days to see if you did it. And so, of course, I left the event, and I for me, it was like getting some book and reading it. And when he called, I was so proud to say I did it. And he was like, I'm really proud. Not a lot of people that I've talked to actually did their thing. Most people, it just goes to voicemail. And so that always stood out to me, that there's so much great advice that you get, so many action items that you write down, and the difference between the people that scale and succeed and do things are they actually took action. You execute. You've got a good idea, you actually do it. So many of the things we did with Trainual, when I mentioned we launched not too long ago, and now we've got tens of thousands of people, 100 plus countries around the world using Trainual, and it's been growing really quickly. And it's just because we took people's simple advice, and they tell us something and we do it that afternoon. It doesn't sit on a to-do list for months. You do it that day. So that would be my tip I'd pass along, is just, you get good advice or a good action item, just do it, execute.
I love it. I like the way the way you put that. Let me see if we've got any more questions, or we've got several people just saying, I'm going to look at it. Well, thank you all for interacting with us online. Appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for spending some time with us here on Power Lunch Live on LinkedIn. It's been a real joy to have you on Friday afternoon. I hope you have a great weekend. We've got a great schedule coming up next week and the following week. I've got Melody Godfrey, I've got Billy Zane, I've got Elizabeth Gilbert from Eat, Pray, Love on the program. We're going to be at the Attune Conference in Georgia next week, and then at the Global Venture Summit in Luxembourg the following week. And so we're going to be we're going to continue our road show. And we actually even may be on a boat in the Atlantic Ocean midweek next week to do a little bit of great white research we're going to be on a great white research vessel that's doing some amazing research out there in the Atlantic. But that's to be determined yet. We're still working on that to see how we can pull that off. But anyway, thank you for joining us on the Power Lunch Live. You can visit the website powerlunch.live to look at the upcoming schedule. And thanks for spending your Friday noon lunchtime with us. And Chris, thank you so much.